I'm Steve Wilmot. I'm a mental health clinician with 16 years experience and I hold a master's degree in forensic mental health. HR managers have a seemingly endless list of responsibilities. Being a HR manager can feel like you're the meat in the sandwich. There's the pressure from above to perform and get the best out of your staff, and then there's the pull from below for support and recognition. You're expected to be the rock, the go-to manager who's expected to provide empathy and support whilst still getting the best out of your staff. This places significant demand on your mental health, and if not managed effectively, is a fast track to burnout. In today's video, I'm going to explain in detail what burnout is and the true cause of burnout and how burnout can be prevented and overcome. The World Health Organization now officially recognizes burnout as a legitimate condition, labeling it an occupational phenomenon. The term burnout describes an individual's state of mind in response to their workplace environment and the way they cope within that environment. Burnout develops gradually, beginning with excessive workplace stress and continues to a situation where the person feels constant tension and irritability. The process culminates with three core features, and they are emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and reduced professional efficacy or performance. Burnout is the culmination of chronic stress and has a huge impact on the individual. Some of the physical symptoms include sleep problems, nausea and headaches. Some of the emotional problems include anger, anxiety, and irritability. Some of the cognitive problems include concentration and memory issues, disorganization, and reduced performance. Burnout takes a toll on the individual outside of work too, with 75% of people who experience burnout reporting that burnout has had a big impact on their relationships. Contrary to common belief, burnout isn't caused by our external environment. That's right, the long list of ever-increasing demands that we face on a day-to-day basis aren't the actual cause of burnout. Sure, excessive workloads, deadlines, pressure to perform, these demands increase the likelihood of burning out, if not managed effectively, but they aren't the direct cause of burnout. Burnout is caused by chronic stress, and stress isn't caused by our environment. Stress is caused by how we think about our environment. For example, traffic congestion. Traffic congestion doesn't cause stress. How we react and think about traffic congestion is what causes the stress. Therefore, burnout is caused by how an individual processes and thinks about their demanding workplace environment. Imagine you want to take some beautiful pictures of a gorgeous landscape like the Cook Islands in the South Pacific. And you take your camera there with a big lens to take the photos, but when you get there, you realize the camera lens is cracked or faulty and not working. What's going to happen? Well, you're not going to get very good pictures, are you? It doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in an exotic location with a stunning scenery. If your camera lens is not working properly, you're not going to get very good pictures, or you're going to get very poor pictures. Now, your mind is the equivalent to the lens of the camera. It doesn't matter how great your life is, your environment and your conditions. If your thinking, your mind, your brain is not working the way it should be, your life, your results aren't going to be very good. And this is when burnout develops. So now I'm going to use an example to illustrate how mental filters, these issues in our subconscious mind, attitudes and beliefs, how they can actually cause stress and have a huge impact on our life and cause burnout. So let's use an example that might be pertinent to you. Let's say you have a conversation with your senior manager, with your senior boss, and it's not a very pleasant conversation. It's a bit nasty, didn't go that well, and your boss, he or she used a certain tone of voice and behaved in a certain way, certain body language, and you left the meeting feeling pretty crappy. And after the meeting, you thought to yourself, based on what happened in the meeting, you thought, well, my boss wants to get rid of me. Boss doesn't like me and wants to get rid of me. just based on that conversation, on the tone of voice and the body language and how things were said. The boss didn't actually say, I don't like you, I want to get rid of you. You made this assumption, right? So this is very common, not just, this is a very common situation for these things to unfold this way. So here's my diagram that's going to illustrate it. So that's a brain, by the way, that's a head, and that's a brain in there, that's the head. Okay, so we've got external event. So that external event is the interaction with your boss that I just described. You have that interaction. That external event is perceived by yourself, and then it goes into your mind, the information that you see. Now there's mental filters here. These mental filters are what I spoke about. Examples are beliefs and attitudes and language. These mental filters distort, delete, or generalize the information coming in and create a false internal representation, which is, my boss doesn't like me, my boss wants to remove me from my job, okay? Purely based on that interaction. Now what does that do? That internal representation then changes your emotional state. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you're a good manager, which I'm sure you are, if you're doing a great job or a very good job and you believe that your boss doesn't like you and wants to get rid of you, how's that going to make you feel? Probably angry. So the emotional state change might be anger. Now, a bit of occasional anger is fine. It's not a problem, but when we feel anger constantly or on a regular basis, it actually damages the body. It damages the heart, the cardiovascular system. It affects your mind, how you think and feel and relate to others. It affects your immune system. Big problems when your emotional state is in the wrong place all the time, like anger. Okay, and if you're going into work every day or often seeing your boss and feeling angry, unwarranted anger, there's big problems, okay? And this is where burnout starts to develop because this is stressful. So your emotional state changes to anger, for example. What happens then? Well, your physiology, the way your body functions, changes. Now, what does that mean? Well, in this case with anger, what happens? Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, there's stress hormones released into your bloodstream. Now, that, as I said, these two are linked. That creates wear and tear on the body over time. A bit of occasional anger, not a problem. A bit of occasional anxiety and fear, not a problem. It's when we feel it constantly or all the time on a regular basis, this is when problems start to begin, and that's when health problems begin too. So, we've been through this, so the physiology's changed now because you're feeling angry. And what then? Well, when the physiology changes in the body, how the body is functioning, the result is usually a change in our behaviour. So what might be a case here? Well, when I used to get fearful and angry working in the forensic hospital, with the criminally insane, the way I used to change my behaviour was I'd drink. I just drink alcohol to cope with this pressure and stress and these physiological changes and the emotional state I was in. I used to just drink alcohol most nights just to numb it, So that's a very common behavioural intervention or strategy to try and, change the physiology, change the emotional state, and to change or numb the thoughts, the internal representation based on your environment. Yeah. So as I've alluded to, these sort of behavioural interventions, whether it's alcohol, which is negative, or exercise, which is positive, exercise is a very positive intervention, but it's not going to actually solve the problem because you're changing your behaviour, exercising, physiology changes, endorphins feel good, that's great. So therefore you're feeling less angry because you've exercised, and your internal thoughts they'll probably stay the same anyway because the event and your mental filters haven't changed, yeah? Your environment stayed the same, and your mental filters, you're deleting, distorting, and generalizing in your subconscious mind due to your beliefs, usually beliefs or attitudes, haven't changed. Therefore, you can do all the exercise you want in the world, but eventually it's going to come back when you go back to that environment. Your mental filters are going to start to create that same internal representation, which messes up your emotional state, which messes up your physiology, and that messes up your behavior too. Mental filters are the equivalent to weeds in the garden bed. In order to remove these weeds, you need to get down on your hands and knees and pull out the weed by its root. Behavioural approaches to managing stress, such as exercise, are really helpful in the short run. They help you manage it, helps manage it, but it actually doesn't solve the problem. So in this case with exercise, what happens? There's a change in your physiology when you exercise, there's endorphins released, and this makes you feel good, and it reduces your stress, and it might even create some more positive thoughts in your mind too. But the thing is, the origin of the stress is not being addressed. Therefore, the problem comes back. The stress comes back eventually after a few hours or a day. It comes back because the person has these mental filters, these attitudes and beliefs, for example, that are driving the stress. So this is very much a superficial band-aid solution using exercise to manage stress. Using exercise and any other behavioural approach to managing stress and burnout is like going into the garden bed, seeing a bunch of weeds there, getting the whippersnipper out and just cutting them down, cutting the weeds down with the whippersnipper. Now, when you first look at the garden bed after that, you're like, awesome, I've done a great job, I've cut down the weeds, but you've left a little bit poking out of the ground, but also, more importantly, the roots are still underneath the surface, yeah? What happens then? The weeds are going to grow back because you haven't addressed the origin of the problem. You haven't ripped the weed out with its root. My approach to removing mental filters involves exactly that. Getting down your hands and knees and ripping the weed out with its root. I use scientifically proven strategies for accessing your subconscious mind and removing such mental filters as attitudes and beliefs that are driving your stress and driving your burnout. Studies show that jobs with high emotional demands that require empathy, along with an expectation of controlling one's emotions to fall in line with an organisation's values, have higher rates of burnout. The term used to describe this is emotional labour. Sound like HR management? I've never been a HR manager, but I have been a clinical manager in the forensic mental health system, where it was our job to provide care, treatment and control of the criminally insane. That's right, providing rehabilitation for dangerous psychotic patients with a history of significant violence, often murder. My role as clinical manager involved significant accountability and responsibility. I needed to make very quick decisions, crucial decisions in a moment to keep my patients and staff safe. So I know how it feels to be overwhelmed and have this pressure and expectation placed upon you, not knowing how to cope. I know what that feels like. I know how it feels to have pressure and stress mounting, turning into chronic stress that led into burnout. I know how that feels. But I overcame burnout. I came through the other side. I researched and studied and learnt through experience and learning the most effective scientific methods for not only overcoming burnout, but thriving once again. It's now my life's mission to support and empower fellow managers with the knowledge and the skills to overcome burnout and to once again thrive. That's all I've got time for today. Thanks for watching. I'm Steve Wilmot. Bye for now.